Hello and welcome to this edition of Bayou Time. I'm your host, Keith Weishaupt, licensed clinical social worker with Chairwoman Home Care. Very glad you are joining us. However you may be joining us, we appreciate it very much. And we love to bring you updates about what's happening here at the parish, within the parish. And the best way to do that is talk to those people who are helping us make decisions about the parish. We welcome back to the program Chairwoman Jessica Domang. Jessica, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me again, Keith.
All right. And of course, Chairman Parish Council District 5. And joining her, Mr. Carl Harding. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah,
Chairman
good
Parish
afternoon.
Council District 2.
Yes, sir.
And very good to have that. And one of the things that I think people don't always realize is that there is so much time, energy, meetings that go into all of the work that you guys do. We were just kind of talking about it before the show today about y'all have meetings about meetings, and then there's things that y'all can do and decide, and then we have other people that do that to decide. So Jessica, walk us through a little bit about what we have coming up, a big week as we have a council meeting, but let's talk about all the things that go into those things beforehand.
Yeah, definitely. And it seems like every time I come here, we have a big week.
Right.
But
Another big week.
yes. Tonight, we do have committee meetings, and we also have our condemnations. So we have our condemnations every 3 months.
Right.
And so tonight will be a long meeting. Mr. Carl, please eat dinner before we go tonight. Yeah, I think we have 26 properties on that list
Right.
for us to consider as far as condemnation. And a condemnation meeting is really kind of a hearing.
Right.
So we as the council are the judge and the jury, basically, to decide whether your property is condemned or whether we give you extensions or whatever it is that we decide to do. So there's a lot that goes into those meetings. And so it's a lengthy process. And we've been trying to do our best to expedite as much as possible because we still have a backlog of those properties. But I don't know about you, Carl, but in the areas that I've been driving around, I have been seeing a lot of structures being torn down. A lot of places that you saw before and thought, why wasn't that torn down before? I've noticed that recently. So I'm not sure if they're just getting to the end or if they're just getting to where maybe they now have money to be able to do those things. But I have noticed that a lot in the parish, so that is very refreshing.
Yeah, I've had some family come down from out of town. It was ironic that they drove on both sides of the parish, and that was the one thing that both of them, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, mentioned. They said, "Oh my gosh, do you remember that used to be that house right there? Oh, do you remember it used to be that building right there?" So Jessica, I will tell you, we had that conversation over Easter when they came down and drove over to my parents' house and were just surprised at those number of buildings that had to be condemned.
Insurance has a lot to do with it. Even consolidated government. Ourselves, we have some buildings that need some repairing, and we have to wait till all the insurance things are taken care of. We look at the nuisance and abatement. That's nuisance. A building that's a nuisance and it has been abandoned, and that's the difference between tall grass and nuisance and abatement. So when people looking at one thing and the other thing is it's a totally different category.
Right,
So,
right.
We look at that as it is, and so if you ride around in the neighborhood, I know one block that has 12 houses that probably need some repairing. 12.
12 houses on one street, that one block.
One block.
Yeah, and again, like you said, there's so many different factors that go into that. Some things we have control over, some things the parish has some control over, some things we don't have control over, and that's where there's so many different things at play here.
Yeah. Also, people don't know that you have to have the proper permits for that. The permits are waived. There's an online application that you can have for your permits and things like that. So we have to really put it out there, keep putting it out there for the information to get out to our constituents and people in the Chairwoman Parish, so know how to apply.
Right, and Chris and his office, Chris Pulaski, of course, do such a phenomenal job and have worked so diligently in the kindness of borrowing staff and sharing staff through the parish to be able to catch up on all of those things and getting those permits done. But you're exactly right. We've got to follow that process. Jessica, what were you going to say about that?
Oh, I was just going to follow up on what Carl was saying is that, we do have a lot of structures that need to be that need to come down. But we also have to face the reality that we are facing a housing crisis right now. And that is part of those meetings that we are having. And we're having some pretty important meetings this week as well to talk about housing. And that's actually why I brought Mr. Harding on today, is because he's really been kind of a champion of trying to find some housing resources. And we wanted to come in and talk today about how some things are really kind of out of our control, especially when it comes to Bayou Towers and it comes to Senator Circle and those areas, because it's a federal program, and so it's not even the state. We have to really kind of rely on the federal government, and so that is a very tedious process.
Well, and not only that, and I want to dive into that, and we'll do that in
Yeah.
the next segment, but it's really interesting as a social worker in our area, I spend a great deal of time and energy talking with families and patients about whether or not they can stay living with their family member here now the last 2 years for certain, about where they are, or if they need some independent living, or if they need an assisted living. And there are and have been waiting lists for months, sometimes years, in these facilities. And that was before Ida. That was
Right.
before COVID. And so it's really important for people to realize that a lot of these housing issues aren't necessarily new, but both COVID and now certainly Ida have compounded those problem areas. And like you said, Jessica, some of these things we can do something about. Some of the things we have to rely on HUD as a national organization to do something about. And Jessica, I think it's really important that we reiterate that a lot of these decisions are beyond the parish.
Yes, absolutely. The two big housing crisis areas that we're talking about, Senator Circle and the high rise, those are actually HUD programs, which are operated by the federal government. So that's outside the state and that's outside the parish. However, there is a meeting that's going to be this Thursday at 3 o'clock, which Carl and I plan on attending with HUD, and we want to get some answers because we haven't been able to give as many answers as we've wanted so far. And so then we'll be able to actually communicate with our constituents as to what's happening and what's the next steps. And so definitely I appreciate Mr. Carl inviting me to that meeting because I think it's really important.
Well, and let's talk about the numbers of people that impacts, because I think some people think they may know, but thank you for knowing that, Mr. Harding, and sharing that with us. So, Carl, share with us kind of the numbers that we're talking about. They're being impacted by both of those.
Senator Circle, they had 217 units. Right now, Senator Circle is actually closed down.
Right.
So that's family units. Then the high rise, they had 246 people, but 300 units in the high rise.
Right.
And you look at, just like Ms. Doman had said, is the fact that, we are the representative of the people.
Right.
So when HUD runs things, the housing authority, that's a different little animal we have there, because number one, the people that live in Senator Circle were under different circumstances than people that were in the high rise.
Right.
The people in the high rise were basically the elderly and physically challenged
Right.
people
Seniors.
at a certain age.
Right.
And you look at Senator Circle. So in Senator Circle, these people may have had vouchers that vouchers had a time frame to those vouchers.
Okay.
All right. And the people in the high rise do not have time frame to their vouchers, but then to be residents of Terrebonne Parish, they have to use those vouchers in Terrebonne Parish. We have a problem that actually have been rising and rising and rising. We have a housing problem.
Right.
And with that housing problem, so now we're looking at probably close to 500 people just to start off with.
Yeah, and that's our beginning point, right?
Right, just
The
to
ones that
start
we
off
know of.
with.
And so we're talking about the difference between what qualifies you to live at Senator Circle, which is different from what qualifies you to live at Bayou Towers. And as you mentioned, those are family units at Senator Circle.
Right.
There's a lot of families. We're talking about younger people, children, grandchildren, who are all of a sudden now displaced and continue to be displaced from the storm, because both of those are shut down. And now we're looking at those people who qualified for Bayou Towers or the high rise, and those people are in need still, but it's a different it's a different group of people, right, with different qualifications. But I love the fact that I never knew that there were vouchers that qualified for those people. And it's in Chairwoman Parish, and we don't really have a place for those people to go.
And to go back on the setup, see, the housing authority, HUD has a representative, and there's a board of commissioners that's appointed by the parish president.
Okay.
And with that board appointment, there should be some actually interaction from that board and the housing authority. And what recently we've been trying to do was to get a report to come to the council, because a lot of people don't watch HTV.
Sadly, right?
Yeah,
That's
right.
a shame.
Everybody don't watch council meetings. They don't even read the newspaper.
Right.
So to get the information out there, because we're constantly getting into circumstances where we have to answer questions, or we ask questions that we don't have the answer to.
Right.
So it's rather difficult. I wouldn't use the word force, but I'm using the word force. I don't like to use it.
Right.
To force them to come. Well, we don't have any jurisdiction over them.
Correct.
So we're trying to get some transparency, see what we can do, what they're doing, so we can actually combine what we're trying to do to come to get some resolve to our housing problem.
Some alignment, if you will, between
okay.
what they're doing and what we're trying to do. Are there any kind of general questions, anything that you've been getting asked to ask of them? Is there anything in the last couple of minutes of this segment that you want to go through? Any of those questions? Or is it just a little bit more transparency about where are we and what is our plan?
Well, number one, out of those 217 units that are in the circle, there are some people that in the process. I guess you can call them somewhat squatters, because they have nowhere else to go. No electricity, no water. I just recently talked to a lady that she actually got tired of being there, because she was one of those people, and she moved to Morgan City, but then her job is here. So she got to go back and forth. That's there. So how many of those 217 units are available right now, or how long it's going to be there? That was an environmental study. Hopefully we can get the environmental study will actually determine whether the high rise itself will be torn down. There's a lot of problems in reference to that.
Right.
So to get those specifics, we need to know what we're going to do.
Right. And so you bring up a really good point as we close this segment about condemnation. One of those places is a high rise. And that's not something that can be decided here at the parish. That's something that's got to be decided through HUD. And that's a national program for them to kind of say what we can or can't do and how we can figure out how we move forward with that. But you brought up a really good point, Carl, about some of the things that these issues have created for patients or for families and residents, and what they are doing and how difficult that is. There's some other issues that are being created from that, some homelessness, some mental health issues, some addiction issues, and that very often leads to some crime issues.
Yes, we can start off where I have some people say, well, look, seem like a lot of people in a particular area in the inner city say, well, it seems like these people don't have a place to live. So you're absolutely correct. They have a place to stay, but then they don't have a place to live. So someone may have you around their house, but they're not going to let you live at their house. You know, man, there are people family members that might be in a position where, well, I can give you a cot to, you know, man, to lay on, something to eat, but then you have to leave because we can't afford to actually have no more on us than we have now. When some of the bayous have had damages, we've noticed in Jessica's area, my area, and District 1's area, that we have an influx of those folks that's coming from outside and to the inner city, because we have close proximity to their needs, a convenience
Services,
store,
right?
services. So now if you travel around, you have other circumstances, you know, I mean, mental health that's actually comes into issue. Some of the other things that are associated with depression and social work and stuff like that. Whereas now we have a turmoil. We not only have housing, we have food, we have shelter, we have the health care, and some of the circumstances. Medication, yeah.
Right?
Crime.
So all of those things that happen, and when we don't have our needs met, and it's one of the things Jessica and I learned in school,
Yeah.
you know, that self-actualization, when we have our minimal needs aren't met, it starts to impact other things. If we have food insecurity because we don't have a place to stay or a place to cook, if we're not getting our medications because we don't have access to get where we need to go, then that creates some other issues for crime. That, you know, there are a lot of people that commit crimes out of necessity because they can't afford to get what they need, and that's kind of a growing problem. I will tell you, just driving in our area, there are 4 or 5 different little tent setups, 4 of them in parking lots,
Yes.
where we can see that people are living there outside. And that's very different for our city, our area. I don't
Yeah.
know that we've ever had that before.
Yeah, it's unfortunately becoming a reality in our area, and
Right.
as you said earlier, it's a compound between, COVID-19, and then we turned around and we had the double whammy with Hurricane Ida.
Right.
And so, I work in a mental health clinic as well, and
Correct.
I do assessments all day long. And so some of the stories are absolutely heartbreaking that people have gone through or people are going through. And it is very difficult. And sometimes we get so caught up in the fact that we want it to be finished now, or we want it to be cleaned up now, or we want our recovery to be done now, but you literally have people still in this parish who don't have those needs at all. I mean, that don't even have a place to stay.
Right.
And so we really have to kind of take a step back and say, well, what can we do as a community to come together, to show some empathy towards each other, because it is very important. Because we have so many people who have so many needs right now. And where do we start with that? I mean, that's
Well, we have people that can't get to their service needs at START or at South Central. They can't even go and get their access for help. They can't even get there because of the limitations. And even places that have homelessness programs, it's difficult. They're inundated with the numbers of people. And we may start seeing an increase of those number of people as these trailers are going to be starting to be removed.
That is one
level.
of my biggest concerns, because, to be honest with you, it seems as if that District 2 in the inner city is going to have the influx of those people. Not to say that we don't welcome them, because that's why I'm here.
Right.
I'm here because I want answers from the Housing Authority, anyone to give the answers. And you're a social worker. I do what I do as a council member. All these agencies have to come together and solve the problem,
Right.
and really brainstorm what's going on, because
Think outside the box some if we can.
definitely so. We just can't just focus on, hey, look, we see that building there, how much it's going to cost, but then what is the effect and the type of building, and when we're coming back up. I think the parish president has reached out to get extra funding and he's presently trying to get an extension or some assistance that's coming in. I talked to Senator Lane and Senator Feasy in reference to trying to rush an opportunity for us to perhaps get an extension. With that extension, we can actually get more funding later on down the line. But it's going to be a very difficult challenge for us, because we're coming up to 30 days away from that.
And I love the fact that you mentioned that you're sitting there as a council person and I'm sitting here as a social worker, and right between us is both.
Right. Yeah, right.
Not only our chairwoman, but also a social worker in LCSW, and looking forward to what we are trying to do to bridge the gap of some of these challenges. And I love the fact that y'all are spending the time, energy, and the number of meetings to try and figure that out. And so they're not easy answers, but we want to let people know, we want to bring to you information that lets you know these are not just decisions made here by the parish. Some of them are not even made by the state, but we're doing everything that we can about trying to figure out what to do and asking those questions. I look forward to y'all coming back on, sharing with us some of those HUD answers that we've gotten, with hopefully, prayerfully, that there's some transparency with that. And so, but I can't thank y'all enough for coming on to let us know what's going on, and helping to truly be leaders in our community, taking care of the people, not only in your district, but everywhere in our area. So we thank y'all for coming on and sharing that with us.
Thank you.
You got it. Very good. All right. And that will do it for this particular segment. Thank you for spending a little time talking about with our representatives about your area and what we're doing to make things a little bit better. And that will do it for this particular segment. Don't go anywhere. A lot more right here on Boggy Time.